Welcome everyone to tonight's Campfire and Candlelight story. In this original Detective Ambrose Sinclair bedtime story, we again join him in New Orleans in the late 1800s. This time on the hunt for the priceless Star of the South. If you enjoy this story, we kindly ask that you leave a like on the video. We'd also love to hear your ideas for future stories on the channel in the comments section below. And now, without further delay, we begin our tale. The crisp rustle of his starched collar against his skin was a familiar sensation, one that usually accompanied a sense of mild annoyance. Ambrose Sinclair meticulously adjusted his cravat in the ornate, if slightly tarnished, silver mirror. Formal nights out were, to put it mildly, a necessary evil. As a scion of a prominent Boston family, a lineage that traced its roots back to the Mayflower itself, a fact his mother never let him forget, these social obligations were practically mandatory. Even in New Orleans, hundreds of miles south of his ancestral stomping grounds, the ghosts of proper Bostonian society clung to him like Spanish moss. Sinclair, however, was a man of contradictions. While the weight of his family name and its attendant expectations rested squarely on his shoulders, his heart belonged to the shadowy corners of New Orleans, not its glittering ballrooms. He was a gentleman, yes, but also a private detective, a profession that often required him to trade his finely tailored suits for something a little more practical. The Sinclair Detective Agency, nestled discreetly on the edge of the French Quarter, was his true passion. Tonight, however, duty called. It was the annual Milne Gala, a social fixture in New Orleans, and his presence was expected. The Milnes, despite their dwindling fortunes, still held considerable sway in the city, and maintaining connections, even at events he found tedious, was a necessary part of his life, and, occasionally, his work. He sighed, a small puff of air that barely disturbed the perfectly arranged folds of his cravat. Tonight, he would play the part of the prominent black sheep of the Sinclair dynasty, the charming gentleman. Tomorrow, he would return to the world he truly loved, the world of mysteries and intrigue. Tonight's gathering was being held at the Milne Mansion, a grand edifice that stood as a testament to that family's former glory. The Milne family, once renowned for their wealth and influence, had seen better days, yet their legacy lived on, embodied in their magnificent home and the priceless artifacts it contained. Just as Sinclair was finishing dressing, a knock sounded at his front door. He opened it to find two familiar faces in faded police uniforms. Officer Murphy, the burly Irishman with a straightforward approach to his job, and Officer Dubois, the wiry Frenchman with a sharp mind and a seemingly endless network of friends and family that kept him well informed on the city's underworld. "Detective Sinclair," Murphy began, his voice low and gruff. "We've got a bit of a situation. The Milne party has been cancelled, but Mr. Milne still wants to see you." "Something about a theft," Dubois added, his voice a sharp contrast to Murphy's. "A family heirloom, they say." "You said Mr. Milne sent you, not the captain?" Sinclair inquired. "Well, it was a mutual decision," Dubois replied. "Mr. Milne thought the services of a detective would be beneficial in this matter. Mr. Milne said he was agreeable to your rate, without even knowing what they were." "I was the one who suggested Mr. Milne hire you, Detective Sinclair," Murphy added. "Well, as the only detective agency of consequence in town, I do appreciate the gesture," Sinclair said with a smile. "As I'm already dressed for a night out, officers, I guess we might as well be on our way." The carriage ride to the Milne Mansion was a journey through the heart of New Orleans. As they rolled along the cobblestone streets, Sinclair couldn't help but admire the city's unique blend of European elegance and Creole charm. The air tonight was thick with the scent of exotic spices and the sweet aroma of magnolia blossoms. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the city, illuminating the towering smokestacks and the intricate latticework of the wrought iron balconies. As they approached the waterfront, the city's maritime heritage became evident. The Mississippi River, a mighty waterway, flowed past the city, carrying goods both to and from distant lands. The riverfront was a bustling hub of activity, with ships of all sizes docked at the wharves. The air was filled with the sounds of shouting, the creaking of wooden ships, and the distant rumble of riverboats. The harbour was a fascinating blend of the old and the new. Massive sailing ships shared the waters with sleek, modern steamships. Tall ships with massive masts and wooden hulls stood side by side with sleek, iron-clad vessels, belching smoke into the sky. The contrast was striking, a testament to the rapid pace of technological advancement. As the carriage rolled along the waterfront, Sinclair couldn't help but marvel at the sheer diversity of the vessels. There were graceful schooners, sturdy sloops, and imposing clipper ships, each with its own unique history and purpose. The steamships, with their powerful engines and imposing structures, represented the future of maritime trade. But no matter what the ships looked like, what always remained the same were the men working on and around them. Only a few sailors could be seen moving around the ships, the majority undoubtedly off in the city's various bars while they had the chance. Sinclair watched as longshoremen unloaded crates and barrels. The men standing around the docks not lifting anything were either merchants or warehousemen, and busied themselves haggling over prices or arguing over the speed of the longshoremen. The Milne family, Sinclair knew, had made their fortune from shipping. Their mansion, a grand Spanish villa-inspired structure, was the living representation of their wealth and influence. As the carriage drew closer, Sinclair adjusted his cufflinks, a small gesture that reflected his commitment to a certain level of formality. He was a man who understood how to appreciate the finer things in life, and tonight he intended to make a good impression. As he stepped out of his carriage, the cool night air brushed against his skin, carrying with it the scent of river water and distant jasmine. The Milne mansion was a testament to the architectural richness of New Orleans. The building, a blend of Spanish colonial and Creole styles, was a masterpiece of design. The thick walls and deep balconies, characteristic of Spanish colonial influence, provided shade and privacy. The mansion's grand entrance, with its imposing double doors and ornate transom windows, invited exploration. His gaze settled on a middle-aged man with a weary expression standing in the doorway. "Detective Sinclair," the man greeted him, his voice firm but quiet. "A pleasure to have you." Sinclair nodded politely. "Likewise, Mr. Milne. I understand there's a matter of some urgency." Mr. Milne led Sinclair inside. The front foyer of the Milne mansion was a breathtaking sight. The high ceilings, adorned with intricate plasterwork, created an air of grandeur. The dying sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating the polished hardwood floors and the elegant furnishings. A grand staircase, sweeping up to the second floor, dominated the space. The walls were adorned with family portraits and antique mirrors, reflecting the family's rich history. The air was filled with the subtle scent of expensive perfume and polished wood. He led the group to his study. "It's about our family heirloom," Milne explained, his voice low. "The Star of the South, a priceless diamond necklace. It's been stolen." "The Star of the South, you say?" Sinclair asked, his curiosity piqued. "A rather poetic name for a stolen jewel. Tell me, Mr. Milne, what makes this necklace so special?" Milne hesitated for a moment, his eyes distant. "It's not just the diamonds, Detective. It's the history of it. The necklace has been passed down through generations of the Milne family. It's a symbol of our wealth, our power, and our legacy." Sinclair nodded, sensing the emotional weight of the theft. "And you believe it was stolen by someone who knows its significance?" Milne nodded solemnly. "Yes. It wasn't a random act. Someone targeted the necklace." "And when was the last time the necklace was seen?" Sinclair asked, his curiosity growing. "Perhaps there's a clue in the timing." "The last time I saw it was last night," Milne replied, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I was admiring it, as I often do. I left it in its usual place, locked in the family safe." He walked over to an armoire and opened the cabinet doors, revealing a metal safe. Mr. Milne spun the dial to unlock it and opened the door. "When I went into the safe today, it was gone," he said. Sinclair crouched down and examined the safe. "How many people live here in the residence, Mr. Milne?" Sinclair asked. "There are 4 other family members in the residence, as well as 3 house staff who live downstairs. None of them have any idea how the thief could have gained access to the safe." "Who are the other family members?" Sinclair inquired, his mind already pondering the possibilities. Milne hesitated for a moment, his brow furrowed. "There is my wife, Eleanor, a delicate woman with a love for the finer things in life. My son, Thomas, a young and impetuous man with a habit for spending much too much time in taverns and gambling halls. My daughter, Margaret, a quiet and bookish soul. And finally, my elderly aunt, Beatrice, who rarely leaves her room." "Mr. Milne," Sinclair began, "I believe it's crucial I speak with everyone in the house, including the staff. To start, I'd like to speak with your wife, Eleanor." Milne nodded, a look of resignation crossing his face. "She's usually in the sunroom, reading or painting. You'll find her there." Sinclair thanked Mr. Milne and made his way through the grand hallway. The mansion was a labyrinth of rooms, each more opulent than the last. As he walked, he couldn't help but admire the intricate details of the architecture, from the ornate woodwork to the stained glass windows. Finally, he reached the sunroom, a tranquil space bathed in the moonlight. Large windows offered a panoramic view of the nighttime garden, where colourful flowers bloomed in abundance. Eleanor Milne sat in a plush armchair, lost in a book. She looked up as Sinclair entered, her expression first of surprise and then of resignation. "Mrs. Milne," Sinclair began, his voice soft but firm. "I'm Detective Sinclair. I'm here to investigate the theft of the Star of the South." Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on him. "I understand. Please, have a seat." Sinclair thanked her and began his questioning. "Mrs. Milne, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the necklace. Can you tell me exactly when you last saw it?" Eleanor paused, lost in thought. "It was the day before yesterday, I believe. I had gone into the safe to get some money to pay for tonight's cancelled soiree and saw it in there." Sinclair nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And no one else saw the necklace that day?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I don't think so. The house was relatively quiet that day. Most of the family was out, and the staff was busy with their duties planning for the gala." Sinclair pressed on. "Can you recall any unusual activity that day, anything out of the ordinary. I was mostly occupied with planning for the party, as you are obviously aware. It's one of the major social events of the year, and there was a lot of pressure to make it perfect, she explained. Quite the undertaking, I suppose, Sinclair said. Indeed, but if I'm being truthful, the planning is less of a burden than the cost of it all, she confided. I don't know if you're aware, Detective, but our fortunes are not what they once were. The Milne shipping fleet is primarily sailing vessels. My husband saw no future in steam, and now we're losing business to companies that had more foresight. This party is important, Eleanor went on. It reminds people that the Milnes are one of the prominent families of New Orleans, even if our aging ships cannot. Thank you, Mrs. Milne, Sinclair said. I appreciate your candor. Now, do you know where I might find your son Thomas? If I know my son, he's engaged in some form of leisure, most likely the billiards room. As he walked down the hallway, he passed more of the opulent decor the Milnes had surrounded themselves with. The walls were adorned with oversized paintings of family members and ships at sea, as well as elaborate tapestries, and the floors were covered in rich Persian rugs. The billiards room was a spacious room, dimly lit by a single chandelier. Thomas was leaning over the game table, his intense focus suggesting he was deeply engrossed in planning his shot. Sinclair cleared his throat, drawing Thomas's attention. Mr. Milne, he began. I am Detective Sinclair. I'm investigating the theft of the family heirloom. Thomas glanced up, a look of annoyance crossing his face. What do you want from me, Detective? He asked, his voice tinged with irritation. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the theft of the Star of the South, Sinclair replied. Can you tell me where you were last night? Are you suggesting I had something to do with its disappearance? Thomas asked. I have made no suggestions as of yet, Sinclair replied. I am merely putting a picture together of who was where and when. From there, suggestions may flow. Thomas shrugged. I went out with some friends. We started here playing billiards, and no one snuck off and stole the star when my back was turned. After several games, we left and went to a few taverns, had a few drinks, you know the usual. Can you name these friends? Sinclair pressed. Thomas hesitated for a moment. Sure, I can. But what does it have to do with the theft? Sinclair ignored the question. The names, if you don't mind, Mr. Milne. Thomas reluctantly provided the names of his friends, which Sinclair wrote down in his notebook. Thank you. Now, if you could be so kind as to direct me to where your sister might be. His questioning of Thomas complete, Sinclair made his way to speak to Margaret next. Thomas had informed him that she was likely to be found in the garden at the back of the mansion, one of her favorite hiding places when things were tense in the household. The garden was a serene oasis, a world away from the bustling city and busy harbour. The only sound was that of bugs buzzing quietly. A solitary frog could be heard from a distant corner of the garden. A winding stone path led to a secluded gazebo, where Margaret was sitting, lost in a book. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated her face, casting long shadows across the page. Sinclair approached her quietly as he emerged from the dark, not wanting to frighten her out of her peaceful moment. Miss Margaret, he began, his voice gentle. I'm Detective Sinclair. I'm investigating the theft of the family heirloom. Margaret looked up, startled. Oh, hello, she said, her voice soft. Please sit down. She gestured to an empty chair beside her. I'm afraid I can't be of much help. I was in my room most of the day. When was the last time you saw the Star of the South? Sinclair asked, trying to keep his tone gentle. Margaret hesitated, a thoughtful expression on her face. It's difficult to say. I haven't paid much attention to it lately. It's a beautiful piece, of course, but I've always felt a bit uneasy about its presence in our family. It's a symbol of our past wealth and privilege, and I don't believe we truly deserve it. Not anymore, at least. Sinclair raised an eyebrow. You think the necklace would be better off in someone else's hands? It's difficult to say, Margaret replied, her voice filled with a strange sort of peace. A piece of jewellery, no matter how precious, is just an object. It doesn't serve any real purpose beyond the money it could fetch. That money could be used to build a hospital or feed the hungry. It could make a real difference in the world. Do you think the star was taken in order to feed the destitute? Sinclair asked. Do I think Robin Hood made away with it with only the best of intentions? She asked before answering her own question. No, I don't think many people think as I do. Thank you for your time, Miss Margaret, Sinclair said, and left her to her book. After his conversation with Margaret, Sinclair returned to the mansion, his mind racing. This theft was a puzzle, and he needed more information to piece it together. He sought out Officers Murphy and Dubois, who were waiting in the library. Officers, Sinclair began, I need to ask you to assist with a couple things. Sinclair explained what he required of them before adding, There's one more family member I need to speak with. We'll reconvene when you have completed your tasks. Murphy and Dubois nodded, shared a quick glance, and then turned and went on their ways. With the investigation underway, Sinclair decided to speak with Aunt Beatrice. He was told she rarely left her room, so he made his way up the grand staircase to the top floor. The staircase wound its way up, each highly polished step a testament to the family's wealth and prestige. Finally, he reached the top floor, a quiet and secluded part of the mansion. The hallway was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of old books and dust. Portraits of proud-looking ancestors lined the walls, their stern expressions and piercing eyes seeming to watch his every move. Sinclair knocked on the door to Aunt Beatrice's room and waited. After a moment, he heard a shuffling sound, followed by the creak of the door opening. Aunt Beatrice was a frail woman, her face etched with age. She turned and sat in a rocking chair, her gaze fixed on a painting of a majestic sailing ship with billowing sails, one of many that adorned the walls of her room. Detective Sinclair, is it? She asked, her voice quiet but clear. Did you know the Milnes were once the richest family in all of Louisiana? Sinclair carefully stepped into the room. I'm investigating the theft of the Star of the South, Miss Milne. I was hoping you could shed some light on the matter. The Star of the South, Aunt Beatrice began, her voice filled with nostalgia. It's a symbol of our family's wealth and power. It was gifted to my great-grandfather, a legendary sea captain, by the King of Portugal. It was passed down from generation to generation, a symbol of our maritime heritage. My father, who established Milne shipping here in New Orleans, displayed it proudly in his office. She paused, her gaze drifting to the painting of the sailing ship. It's more than just a piece of jewelry. It's a connection to our past, a link to the brave sailors who built this family's business empire. Given the current state of the family business, Sinclair began carefully, do you think the Star of the South is still a symbol of wealth and power? Or has it become a relic of a bygone era? Aunt Beatrice sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. You're right, Sinclair. The glory days of the Milne family are long gone. The shipping industry has changed, and my nephew, the poor simpleton running it, hasn't been able to adapt. He's neither a sailor nor a businessman, but the Star of the South remains a symbol of hope, a reminder of what we once were. Do you have any information that might assist me in retrieving it? Sinclair inquired. No, unfortunately I don't, she said. I only wish I had taken it myself for safekeeping. My nephew is losing the family business. Of course he would lose the Star of the South as well. Sinclair thanked her for her time and departed the room. He descended the stairs and found Mr. Milne waiting for him. Detective, are you any closer to finding the Star of the South? He asked. You haven't even left the house, and I fear your opportunity to find it is slipping away. Mr. Milne, I believe I have your answer for you, Sinclair responded. If you could get the family together, I should like to share my findings with everyone. The family was then gathered in the grand drawing room. The walls were adorned with more intricate tapestries and oil paintings, while the floor was covered in a large, single Persian rug. The numerous tomes on the bookshelves shared space with statues and fine glassware. At one end of the room, Mr. Milne sat on a plush armchair, his face etched with worry. Beside him sat his wife Eleanor, her delicate features pale and drawn. Their son, Thomas, lounged on a nearby sofa, his posture casual and his expression bored. Margaret, the daughter, sat quietly in a chair in the corner, her eyes fixed on the floor. And finally, there was Aunt Beatrice, frail and elderly, her gaze distant and contemplative. Officers Murphy and Dubois stood behind Sinclair, back from their assigned tasks. Standing before the gathered Milne family in the grand drawing room, Sinclair cleared his throat. I believe I've uncovered the truth behind the theft of the Star of the South, he announced. He paused, letting the silence of the room hang there. The culprit, it seems, was one of your own, Sinclair began, his eyes moving from one family member to the next. Someone who had access to the safe, someone who knew the necklace's value, and someone who had a motive. This is a most serious accusation, Detective, Mr. Milne said. Indeed, Mr. Milne, it is, Sinclair said. But first, Officer Dubois, could you please tell us what you discovered from talking with the household staff? Dubois, who had been leaning casually against the doorframe behind Sinclair, stepped forward. The staff were very cooperative, Dubois began. They all knew about the Star of the South, but none had access to the safe where it was kept. And even if one of them was able to get their hands on it with no one knowing, they had no ability to sell it. The staff here are simple people, and loyal to a point. They nick the occasional piece of silverware when the Milnes are late on the wages, but they wouldn't know what to do with an item such as the Star. In fact, my informants in town tell me no one has seen the Star in the shops or on the docks, where it might be fenced. Excellent work, Dubois, Sinclair said. And you, Officer Murphy, what did you learn? I met with Master Milne's friends, Detective, as you asked, Murphy stated. Decent lads who didn't need much encouragement to talk. And what did you learn from them? Sinclair asked. That Thomas Milne is a drunkard, a gambler, a womanizer, and a layabout, he replied. But most importantly, did they describe him as a thief? No, sir, Murphy replied. And do you believe any of them stole the Star? Sinclair continued. No, I do not, Murphy said. And you believe them to be truthful? Sinclair inquired. Yes, Detective. Master Milne's friends are not the type to manage any kind of caper. They were very truthful with me. Thank you for your inquiries, Officer Murphy, Sinclair said. Sinclair adjusted his cufflinks. He had sympathy for the Milne family, but he enjoyed his chosen profession too much, not to relish the moment. So the staff didn't take it, and Thomas's friends didn't take it. Who did? He asked aloud. Sinclair paused, and seeing no one volunteer to confess to the crime, he continued. Thomas, Sinclair said, his gaze fixed on the young man. You've been described in very unfavorable terms by the people you consider friends, but I've found no evidence to suggest you were involved in the theft of the Star of the South. While your lifestyle may be questionable, your actions, as far as I can tell, were not criminal. A look of relief washed over Thomas's face, although he was still upset on the attack on his character. Sinclair turned his attention to Margaret. Margaret, you've expressed some interesting views on the value of the Star of the South, Sinclair said. You believe it's a useless symbol of wealth and privilege, and that it might be better off in the hands of someone who could benefit from its true value. I wondered if you might have taken matters into your own hands. Margaret's eyes widened in surprise. I would never steal anything, especially not from my own family. Sinclair nodded, his expression unchanged. I understand, but sometimes people do things they later regret. Sympathetic people are sometimes known to act out of a misguided sense of idealism. Margaret remained silent, her face a mask of confusion. And it's for precisely that reaction why I do not believe you committed this crime, Sinclair stated. You are a dreamer, my dear, but not a doer. You retreat from confrontation and lose yourself in the fantastical worlds found in your books. Sinclair could see his words stung the young woman. Do not take these as insults, Miss Margaret. The world is a better place with dreamers in it. Sinclair now turned his attention to Eleanor. Mrs. Milne, you were deeply involved in planning a prestigious social gathering. Such events can be quite costly, especially for a family facing financial difficulties. I ask myself, could the pressure to maintain appearances have driven you to a desperate act? Eleanor's face paled. She looked around the room, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Sinclair pressed on. You could have sold the Star of the South out of necessity to fund this facade of a lifestyle, your party. The money from the sale would have been more than enough to cover the expenses and maintain the illusion of wealth and prosperity. I admit the annual soiree is of great importance to me, but I assure you I did not steal the star, she insisted. Indeed, Mrs. Milne, I agree with you. We both know appearances are what matter most to you. Losing the star will be a terrible loss to the prestige of this family, and thus your reputation in this city. Sinclair then turned to look at Aunt Beatrice. The old woman stared back. And you, Aunt Beatrice, you see yourself as the guardian of that prestige, don't you? Yes, it seems the task of preserving this family's legacy has unfortunately fallen to me, she said, casting a sidewards glance at Mr. Milne, who shifted uncomfortably from her look. Perhaps you believed that the Star of the South was in the wrong hands, Sinclair asked her, without waiting for a response. Maybe you felt that the family no longer deserved such a precious heirloom. Aunt Beatrice's eyes widened in surprise. She clearly hadn't expected Sinclair to suspect her. The Star of the South has been the pride of the Milne family for generations, she protested. Sinclair smiled knowingly. I'm aware of that, Aunt Beatrice, and pride may have motivated you to take it and protect it from those who haven't earned it, but we both know you didn't do that. Don't we? He asked, as he turned to face Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne did not match Sinclair's gaze, instead focusing on a point on the floor in front of his chair. He said nothing, his shoulders slumped. You've been struggling to keep the family shipping business afloat, Sinclair said. The pressures of maintaining the family's reputation, coupled with your own financial difficulties, have driven you to a desperate act, isn't that so? Could you have taken the Star of the South to save your failing business? Mr. Milne's face turned ashen. The weight of this family's legacy has crushed me, he muttered, his voice barely audible. I've made a terrible mistake. I never meant for things to turn out this way. Sinclair nodded. Mr. Milne's face was covered with shame. I was the one who took the Star of the South, he confessed. I staged the theft, hoping to buy some time to sell the necklace discreetly. The money from the sale would have saved our family business. Why didn't you simply sell the necklace without all the theatrics? Sinclair asked. Why report the theft? Why involve myself? Mr. Milne sighed. I was afraid of the scandal. I wanted to make it seem like a real theft, a mystery too hard for even the great detective Ambrose Sinclair. A locked safe, no suspects. I'm no criminal mastermind Detective Sinclair. I just thought it would be easier to sell the necklace if it was believed to be lost forever. Officer Murphy took a step forward to place Mr. Milne under arrest, but Dubois placed a hand on his arm to stay him. What are we going to do? Arrest a man for taking something that already belongs to him? Dubois asked Murphy. You are correct, Officer Dubois, and as such it is time for us to leave. The Milne family has much to discuss. The carriage ride back to Sinclair's residence was a somber affair. The once vibrant city now seemed dull and lifeless. As they passed the harbour again, Sinclair couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy. The ships, once symbols of hope and prosperity, now seemed like relics of a bygone era, just like the Milne family. As this hour, the once bustling waterfront was now eerily quiet. He wondered how many of the ships belonged to Milne Shipping, and for how much longer they would be in port in New Orleans. Officers Murphy and Dubois dropped Sinclair off in front of his home and departed. Once inside, Sinclair removed his evening attire, carefully removing the cufflinks and putting them away. They were given to him by his father, he thought to himself. Sinclair heirlooms. Grabbing a drink, he sat down in his study and looked out the window at the city. The once proud shipping empire of the Milne family was on the brink of collapse. He felt partially responsible. He knew his investigation would be in the Evening Post tomorrow. The Milne dynasty likely wouldn't survive the scandal. As Sinclair watched the sun begin to peek up at the day's break, he also knew that the consequences of Mr. Milne's actions would reverberate through the entire city, affecting workers and sailors alike. The failings of a proud family in business were beyond his control, and he did not know how that would impact the city he now called home. He took a sip from his drink, and for a man who sought answers for a living, it was an uneasy feeling.